Hi, my name's Chris Carlson. I'm the Dean of Student Success, and I also oversee all of Gordon's Honors and Scholars programs. We hope that you'll bring your curiosity with you to Gordon, and curiosity can lead to academic imagination when you plug it into an area of study which you can't help but learn more about. We also believe that academic imagination connected to faith can lead to purpose, those things that plugged in and are given generously back to the world. I'd like to talk a little bit about our Honors and Scholars programs, but particularly about the A.J. Gordon Scholars Program. But first, a description of what we do have. So honors programs to us are curricular programs, an honors level that contribute to your degree, so a major or a minor. So departmental honors, the Kenneth L. Pike Honors Program, the Jerusalem and Athens Forum, which is a one-year seminar-style honors program, and our semesters at Oxford. You can learn more about those at our Gordon Honors page. You can also hear a little bit more in the full menu of Scholars options. Scholars programs are cohort-based. They're four-year programs. Each of them come along with a merit scholarship of some kind, and they are focused in particular areas. I'm going to explain one of those, but you can, again, learn some more about the others at the honors page on our home website. The A.J. Gordon Scholars Program in particular has been around for 40 years. I've been privileged to be the program director for half of that time, but I've been strangely connected to the program for its entire 40 years. It's been founded in a particular principle. So there was a student a while ago who grew up in the foothills of the White Mountains, which is the woods of New Hampshire, on a family farm with some basic schooling, and was a quiet young man. He decided after an all-night conversion experience, got up in church and committed himself to entering the ministry, which was odd for this student of 15, 16 years old who had said nothing up to that point quietly in that church, but declared that openly and realized he had a problem. And the first problem was, well, how are you going to do that from the foothills of the White Mountains? And realized he had to go to get some schooling. He ended up at Brown University, where he engaged with the scriptures for the first time in a deep way. He was quick to pick up languages. He was very good in composition, not so strong in some of the other areas, but really had a knack for understanding the written word and could not get enough of the scriptures. That led him to a second problem, is what do you do with that after college? So he went to his first work after college, which was graduate work, and entered a seminary in Boston, Theological Seminary, in the hub of this part of the city. So this young boy from New Hampshire went to Providence, Rhode Island, which is sort of a city. Yes, it is, but it's small. And then ended up sort of at the doorstep of all the glories of Boston and all the people that were there. Got into his first church at that second, and then part of that church became his second call to a second, much larger church, probably the most prestigious Baptist church in Boston, where he took on the pastoral role. And at that point, both his heart had been shaped differently now, preaching the gospel, but also wanted others to hear the gospel. So in this very privileged church, decided to ask all the parishioners who were paying for the pews that they were sitting in to scooch in a little bit, because we're going to bring some more people in off the street to hear the good news. And that didn't go over so well with some of the parishioners. However, that meant there was more room in the pews for the folks that were going to come and hear that gospel. And that gospel was to go out. And so that community around that church was a significant component of his ministry in that area of Boston at the time. And at some point, realized that the best way to do this is not to bring the whole world into the church to try and explain Christ to them, but to bring Christ to all the world. So in the basement of that church, that young man who had become a pastor and a leader in that community decided to start a school with the principle of being able to welcome anyone who was not privileged enough to be able to get into Harvard, the other great school in Boston at the time, whose families didn't have those means or the privilege to do that, to come and learn how they could get enough training and development to go into that world, to bring Christ to all the world with the gospel in a missional way. And that was the founding of this college. And that was the story of A.J. Gordon. He began with a curiosity, something that was convicted him in that all-night conversion experience at his home church up in New Hampshire, which led him to a path of the first thing he chose to do with his curiosity was plug it in and find some academic imagination in the scriptures and in higher education. And that led him to his first work, which happened to be a seminary. And that led to his second work, which happened to be a pastorate. And the third one, he became the pastor of the Clarendon Street Baptist Church. And so we genuinely believe that genuine curiosity, when it meets academic imagination, can find a faithful purpose. We just may not know what it is when we start. And I hope that you can hear that in that story, because that is actually the story of how A.J. Gordon Scholars work. It's a unique program. All of the Scholars programs feature at Gordon some aspect of the development of A.J. Gordon. So the A.J. Gordon Scholars program, named after him, is about the individual development of a scholar and the character of a scholar, and what we will do with it in the world in that good purpose. The Clarendon Scholars are named after his heart for this city, which developed as he was pastor at a church in Jamaica Plain, and in some original movements at the time for social justice in the city and in the nation. The Dokes Pastoral Ministry Scholars is named after his opportunity to then take on a pastoral role, particularly his second one in the Clarendon Street Baptist Church. So preparing pastors for ministry. And then the Global Honors Scholars Program, which is that rich understanding of bringing the gospel to the world. So the cultural competency that's required to be out and about with doing good work in those ways. So each of them reflect a facet of A.J. Gordon, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the A.J. Gordon Scholars Program. So the character and development of a scholar. What AJs do, if you ask an A.J. Gordon scholar at Gordon what they do, they will answer this way. They'll say, well, here's what I'm doing. So it's a very unique program. It's a tailored approach to personal and professional development. It doesn't have a particular outcome except for yours. So this is a story about Ellie. This is Ellie, came to Gordon. She too was a lover of the scriptures. She had been studying the scriptures since she was about 6 or 7, not just reading them, but truly studying them. So even when I've met her on a visit day, I just was struck by the way she's cared about God's word and wanted to learn even more about it, a deep and insatiable curiosity that needed to be plugged in somewhere. So she was taking an Old Testament class, admired the professor that was teaching it, Dr. Elaine Phillips, professor of Old Testament and a specialist in biblical archaeology. Ellie came to me and asked, well, Dr. Phillips is so amazing. I wonder if it'd be okay if I went to talk to her about what I'm really curious about. And I said, absolutely. Please go do that. And while she was walking over there, I called over to Dr. Phillips and said, you're going to meet someone named Ellie today. I hope you would find a job for her in your department because she's someone worth developing. Part of the role I have is being a coach and developer for AJs. It's fun for me. Ellie ended up as a teaching assistant for Dr. Phillips in Old Testament, which was a joy for Ellie, and couldn't imagine what she's going to do with it next. And I said, don't worry, we'll just do the next thing, see how it goes. And she ended up being a TA, and in her junior year, this is a picture of her as a junior at Gordon. Dr. Phillips travels often, gives lectures in other places, and on Friday, one day in the winter, Dr. Phillips asked if Ellie would be willing to give the lecture in Old Testament based on some notes, and was prepared to do that. It was frightening for Ellie to have that idea of being the owner of the book of 2 Kings for the entire Old Testament class that day. But this is a picture of Ellie that I planted another AJ in the front row to take the picture so I could tell the story. This is Ellie just describing the children of God in the book of 2 Kings. She doesn't have any notes. There's a great ease with which she's explaining the things that need to be explained. And she carried that lecture for the full 50 minutes without any trouble at all. On the way out, this classroom's down the hall from my office. Students were coming out, oh, that girl's on my floor. She does Bible studies with us. And some really tall basketball players came out and were like, I could listen to her all day. Hope she comes back another time. Because Ellie had shared the joy of the scriptures that she's always had and that we've always seen, and that she was just needed an opportunity to be able to develop. That led her to believe that she might actually now, maybe I'll go to graduate school. And so she is now at Cambridge University in England on a full ride scholarship. And the humility that Ellie has in her life is amazing. It always has been. Dr. Phillips and I want to continue to encourage her. She came to me and she goes, Chris, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this opportunity to be at Cambridge. And I said, well, can you read the letter to me again? And she did. And I said, reread this section, which was wonderfully written in great English language, British prose. And there's a clause in there. I said, read that again. And the phrase was something like, and we will make sure that you're taken care of as you come to Cambridge to study. And I said, Ellie, that means they're going to give you a full ride to Cambridge University. She was quite shocked, but that's exactly what you earn when you love the thing that you do and learn to do it very well, is someone realizes it's worth encouraging. And so Cambridge is where she's at now, and hopes. My real hopes are actually Dr. Phillips won't be here forever, and I'm going to retire at some point. But I think Ellie, we would like Ellie to come back and teach the Old Testament at Gordon or somewhere where God would like her to be. So if you want to know what AJs do, the goal of an AJ is to do what you're given and to be very faithful with it. The question an AJ does from the time they rise up till the time they go back to sleep, and ever since, once you wake up in the morning from now on forever, is what will you do with what you've been given? That investment, that piece of the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, and to one he gave 5 talents, and to one he gave 2 talents, and to one he gave 1 talent, each according to their ability. That is the gift that you have been given, this deep curiosity and a set of strengths. These are the foundations of the A.J. Gordon Scholars Program. And if you take those 2 things, pursue them well and develop them and plug them in, then we can ask, well, what does learning look like? Which is the next foundation. And so each A.J. Gordon Scholar will have a different idea of what learning looks like in the areas to which they are called to study, where their academic imagination lights up. And because they're doing that, the next question we have is, well, what does leading look like? Well, certainly someone like Ellie, the leadership that Ellie might have or the influence that Ellie might have will look a little bit different than someone who's working in business, or a little different than someone that's working in the arts or in music. But those are still possible. So what will leading look like is another foundation we work on together. And the last one is faith. What is your personal faith in Christ and how is it developing? But also what becomes the public presence of your faith among others, where you're called to be. Each of those pieces, again, you can hear in the story both for Ellie, but also in A.J. Gordon himself. Each of those have a particular foundation for the work that we're called to do. So how do we do that? Well, the foundations are done in a small group cohort. So most of the scholars programs are cohort-based. The AJ program has about 16 to 18 seats. So it's a small cohort of like-minded, eager individuals with unique things to be curious about. And put those together in the first semester in something called Scholars Workshop, which is a 1-credit course. So it's not a heavy load. There's no extra courses in the AJ program in particular. There needs to be room for the coursework and the curiosity that you would love to pursue. Over the course of that first semester and the first year, we build something called an individual learning plan. So in your particular case, what will learning look like and how will we plug it in all the possible ways that we have or the ones that we have to create now that you're here. So the first year, Scholars Workshop, there's small groups. So 1 week in Scholars Workshop, the following week you'll be in a small group, a smaller group of that 18, so maybe 4 to 5 first-year A.J. Gordon scholars and 1 seasoned AJ who's giving their time back because once upon a time someone else did that for them to help you get off to a good start. And then one-on-one conversations with me. In the spring, every AJs take a course called the Great Conversation, which is our first year college level writing course. It does both some writing coaching for AJs, but also this great conversation. What is the nature of the Christian liberal arts and sciences, and why does it matter in the world? And we get to have that conversation together in the spring. Those small groups continue, some one-on-ones continue, maybe once every other week or so. And then we work on something like your individual growth plan, your learning plan. And then we get ready to think about what our second year projects are, which I'll talk about in a moment. But that's sort of a snapshot of what it is. You can see that it's not a lot because I hope that you will be fully engaged with the things that you are here to be able to do. If you're an athlete, if you're a musician or a theater person, if you're in missions or ministry, if you're a researcher that want to get eagerly involved in a class or become a teaching assistant right away, there has to be room for that. So we make room by building this program and foundations with enough room for you to have your academic and co-curricular experiences built right in. From there on, so second year onward, we do mostly seminar style learning. So definitely not another class with credit bearing things, but we might do workshops or seminars together over a period of time, each quad or each semester. The goals of those are personal and professional development and exploration. Particularly in the second year, we have a retreat, which is about solitude and leadership. And we also talk a little bit about vocation and calling in that. to enrich those, but we do that together as a cohort. And then the second year projects traditionally have been something called community asset projects, ways in which we understand we are in a community among others. We have gifts and talents to offer that community, and that community may have some needs or may need some of those strengths that we have to lend to it. And this campus is a small village. It's got 2,000 people on any given day, and those need some help and some encouragement. And so community asset projects might look like creating an opportunity for the college to have a give and take shop. So one year, some students were disturbed at the end of the year when students move out. There's giant dumpsters and people were throwing all of their really great privileged stuff away. Giant televisions, fully wonderful clothes that they just weren't going to use anymore because they're moving on from Gordon. And it looked like a giant unsustainable waste. And someone's heart was properly pricked to do something about that. So that person found some partners on campus who loved curating and trading clothes, got them involved in a project that turned into something called the Common Exchange, which now works on campus. It's a small place. You can drop off a coat that you're done with, and if you see something else that you need or want, you can just take that. So it's a give and take shop. The interesting thing about AJ's is to try and do that is not about the leader. It's actually about the community embracing the new idea and carrying it forward and making it sustainable. So now that Common Exchange has been operating for about 8 years. AJ's don't run it. We simply provided the opportunity for the community to imagine it, figure out how it can get started, and find some leaders in that community to take it on and carry it forward. And that was an example of a community asset project. We do them immediately on the campus in different ways and sometimes locally in our neighborhoods, because that's where we're given to be. And that principle, you can hear, comes from originally Dr. Gordon himself. When he got to the Clarendon Street Baptist Church, he became an influence and a person of character in that immediate community around the church. And we want to seek to do the same thing in the places we're given to be now, but also practicing what that looks like for where we're given to be in the future, wherever God calls us to be. And then finally, sort of the third and final years, I'm hoping that an AJ will pursue deeply the scholarship that they would be pursuing in their academic area, if it's research of some kind or application of your learning in some way, but also having a leadership or an influence on campus in a particular way, whether that's in co-curricular activities like athletics or music or theater, maybe it's leading a missions trip, maybe it's being part of a campus experience and developing those things, but those are all individually decided, but they are sort of expected that you get involved and give back to what you're given. AJs typically will have something called a capstone, so something that caps off their experience, especially their undergraduate scholarship. So one of those could be an honors level synthesis. Some of those honors programs that we offer, so departmental honors, which is a deep dive within your department, which results in some research and scholarship. A Kenneth L. Pike Scholars Honors Program, which allows you to build your own major. There's a capstone to that, so I want to make sure there's room there, but to finish yourself well, so that you have a positive story to tell to your first work after Gordon, whether that's a graduate work or whether that's a job. Having a story to tell about the scholarship that you've done and the learning that you've done and applied makes your story much richer when you're speaking with an employer or a graduate school. And to finish that off well together, we do another version, a much simpler version of Scholars Workshop in the senior year around those same foundations, which will now launch you out into the world in the way God calls you, but reviewing how your strengths have developed, where your curiosity is leading you still, what learning will look like as you leave a college and go into this world, and what leading and influence will be in your home, your workplace, your church or community, and how your faith will be a presence and an active one in all those connection points that you have. This is the nature of the AJ program. And from this point forward, since you've heard it, I will always ask, what will you do with what you've been given? And the nature of our stewardship of our strengths and gifts is part of that character development for an AJ Gordon Scholar. If you'd like to learn some more, you can find out more about our Honors and Scholars programs on our Honors website at Gordon. And you can also dig a little deeper if you'd like to know some more about the AJ Gordon Scholars Program and what it does. Thanks.